Welcome to the last lesson on the Age of Exploration. So, up to this point, we've been talking all about European exploration, where the Europeans are the ones that go out to the world, explore the world, and just that's how the world finds out about each other. Now, to put a little perspective on this, that is not the only age of exploration in world history. Even back in like Egyptian times, they had their age of exploration where they're trying to basically sail as far, walk as far as they can to find out what is out there. The Romans were about exploring. The Chinese were about, well, we're about to talk about Chinese here in a second, but the Chinese throughout their history have been about exploring. Like there's always been this sense of exploration, but not until you get to the European explorations, age of exploration in the 14, 15, and 1600s, do you really see the whole world really coming together, especially the old world, new world type stuff, the Americas versus Eurasia and Africa. Anyways, but in that age of exploration, that European age of exploration, they aren't the only ones exploring. That there are others exploring, you could say. And one of the other cultures in the world that actually has their own little age of exploration as well, around about the same time, are the Chinese. And this lesson is meant to show the comparisons between the motivations and the reasons for exploration, and why the European age of exploration, why the Europeans made such an impact where the Chinese don't. And the interesting thing is, like, again, the Europeans, they're bottom of the barrel. I hope I explained that well enough in the first lesson. They are bottom of the barrel. And they realize it after a little bit, especially after the Crusades and the Black Death, that they realize they're bottom of the barrel. Like, there's so much out there. There's such a better life to be had out there if you could just get those trade routes to get to them. And so that was the motivation. Like, man, life sucks. Let's go out and try to make a better life. That was the initial idea of the age of exploration. The Chinese are just the exact opposite, and this is why they don't really make as big of an impact, is that when they start this massive exploration, which could have easily turned into a world exploration, they would have easily beat the Europeans to it, is that they go out with this mindset of, we're awesome. We're at the top of the barrel. We are the best civilization in the world. But is that true? Are we really the best civilization in the world? Which, by the way, in the 1400s, I imagine most people would say yes. China was the greatest civilization in the world. They were doing quite well at that point. And so they basically started an age of exploration led by this guy you see here, a guy named, I know I'm murdering the name. Like in English we say Zheng He, but I think it's Zheng He. Again, I don't speak Chinese, so I think that's how it goes. But this guy is asked to command a fleet, not just a couple ships, a fleet, to go around the world as best as he can and see, with the goal in mind of, who else is out there? What are their cultures like? Do they match our grandeur is really the end question here. And think about this. Just because they have that question, like, is there anybody else out there as good as us? They have the ability to put in massive resources just to answer this question. Case in point here. Let's see here. This picture. This is a model of one of Zheng He. I'm just going to use the really bad way of saying with Zheng He. It was one of Zheng He's treasure ships. They didn't just build one or two or three of these. Think of Christopher Columbus sailed with one ship. Christopher Columbus sailed with his three ships. Nina, Pinta, and Santa Maria. Then you had Bartholomew Diaz sail with just his one ship. Magellan, I believe he started with 7 ships. That's big. That's really big. That's an armada in European thought process, at least 1500s, we should say. And then you have the Chinese. That boat, by the way, is massive. Just to give you a little bit of a perspective, the largest boat that Christopher Columbus had for him was a Santa Maria, and so that little black ship is the size of Santa Maria compared to one of Zheng He's massive treasure ships. And Zheng He didn't have just 5 or 6 or even 10 of those massive treasure ships. He had, again, I've seen different numberings here, but the numbers are always say somewhere between 80 to 90 of those massive ships. Let me say that one more time, 80 to 90, where each of those ships easily span are basically the size of a football field, a little bit larger than a football field, just gigantic ships. And then again, dozens of them, 80 to 90 of them. And not just that, and this is the best picture I could find. It's not a good one because it only has like 4 of the ships in there. And then you have tons of little support ships around it. And that's actually what Zheng He's fleet had. He had somewhere around 250 support ships, aside from the 80 to 90 massive treasure ships, like those big battleships, you could say. They're not really battleships, treasure ships, because they just hold more men, but that's what they wanted to do. And it was like a floating city going around the Indian Ocean and parts of the Pacific Ocean, exploring the world. Just give a little more perspective. Here's a map of all the voyages of Zheng He, going around China, down the South China Sea, into places like Indonesia, through the Straits of Malacca, gets over to India, gets into the Middle East, goes down to Africa. It's believed he got down, actually pretty far down, towards South Africa. He went up through the Red Sea a bit, and just meeting all these cultures of India, the Middle East, East Africa, Indonesia, and the islands of the Pacific, and just seeing what's out there. And spends, not quite 20 years, something like 15, 17 years, doing all these voyages. There were times when he would get to a city, like say, I can't remember what city this was, but somewhere in East Africa, he gets to a city, and they're in the middle of a civil war, and he comes in and just stops it because he has 30,000 people with him. Most of them, or I shouldn't say most of them, a lot of them trained soldiers, and he just puts a stop to things and like brings peace to the world type stuff. Like, this is a lot of just power the Chinese are demonstrating. Like, their age of exploration is so much more grand than the Europeans by far. We look at the European age of exploration and we say, oh, Christopher Columbus and his 3 ships and his guys, and they almost mutinied on him, and Vasco da Gama, and he barely gets to India, and he has to force the Indians to trade with him because they're like, what do you have? You have nothing. You are nothing. And then you have the Chinese coming around, and they're like, we are much better than you, and let us show you why. So it was quite apparent. The thing is, though, is that they get back, after these 17 years of voyages, these 7 major voyages that Zheng He takes, finally gets back and talks with the emperor. Let me just talk to him a lot, and they just come to the conclusion, there is nobody else out there as good as we are. There just isn't. So what use is exploration any longer? Why do we need to? And plus, you know what? We could use a lot of the wealth that we threw into this to back into our army and our defenses and rebuilding the Great Wall. You know what? Let's do that. There's nobody else as good as we are. Let's just focus on ourselves, and we're good. And that's that. That's the end of the Chinese age of exploration, which has happened just basically 100 years before the European age of exploration. And again, I pointed this out earlier, but this is the main part of this lesson, just to point it out again, the motivations for exploration. The Europeans have this motivation of, we want a better life. We realize we're at the bottom of the barrel. We're willing to take risks. What else is out there? What else is out there? What else is out there type thing. How can we just get that better life? I know I'm sounding redundant, but I'm meaning to. Whereas the Chinese are, is there anybody out there as good as we are? I don't think so. No, there isn't. There just isn't. There's no reason to do this anymore. Why explore when it's just not worth it? And that right there just shows you the big difference between the age of exploration from the mindset of Europeans that we've been talking about mostly throughout this unit, and the mindset of exploration from the Chinese. It's brief but grand age of exploration. And there's definitely a moral in the lesson there. You can't become complacent type thing. There's always something a little bit more to do, or else someone else is going to kind of beat you to it. You could say you'll become a victim of your own kind of sense of entitlement. Anyways, we're just going to end the lesson at this point. But this is a major part of world history that is just becoming more forgotten and more forgotten because it just didn't make the impact that it really could have if it just kept going on. Who knows what the world would have looked like if it was the Chinese that really kept going and kept going and kept going. All right. With that, we'll see you guys in the next lesson.